Have you ever wondered why corduroy trousers come in such different price ranges and whether one is better than the other? Corduroy is the ultimate old money pair of trousers that exudes a laid-back elegance. Personally, I love wearing them during the colder months of the year. They're comfortable, they have a cool look, and they keep me warm. But do you really have to pay a king's ransom to get decent corduroy? That we'll examine today. First of all, what on earth is corduroy? So most fabric is woven in a straightforward way. Think of your wool suiting, your tweed, or your cotton chino fabrics. These are just woven and you end up with one layer of fabric that is then finished, and voila, you have the final product. Corduroy, on the other hand, is different. At the core, corduroy is velvet that has ridges cut out. So how much do you have to pay for corduroy trousers? Basically, you can get cheap bargain stuff at mega retailers like Target, and you'll find stuff probably in the $30 to $40 range. Then the next step up, there's brands like LL Bean or Brooks Brothers, where you can find things in the $70 to $80 range. Furthermore, you have brands like Polo, Ralph Lauren, which have established themselves because of their really great styling. So they'll charge more. So you'll get them at like $200. As you use a more high quality fabric and have more special details and a more refined cut, you'll find price points more in the $300, $350, maybe $400 range or more if you go made to measure or custom. In today's video, we'll look at a pair of LL Bean corduroy pants, which retail for $69.95, and compare them to a $295 pair from Fort Belvedere to fully understand what the differences are, if it's worth paying more than 4 times the price, and what you get so you know how you can best invest your hard-earned money. Why not compare a lower cost pair at $30 to $40? Well, at that point, you just have to make so many compromises that the comparison is really not one that is super helpful. First, let's talk about fabric. While fabric on an expensive pair of pants will have the majority of the cost in it, on the lower end, if you really get cheap fabric, the manufacturing cost may be higher than the fabric itself. When you buy a pair of corduroys for $69.95 retail price, you will have to make sacrifices on the quality of the fabric. There's no way around that. Otherwise, you could not sell it at this price profitably. Typically, corduroys are made with some percentage of cotton. Sometimes they're poly cottons, which is less expensive. Sometimes they use recycled cotton or 100% cotton. But even if you do that, not all cotton is alike. Cotton is a natural fiber that has different staple lengths. And it also depends on what the yarn quality is that you make it into. Is it a 2-ply yarn? Is it a 4-ply yarn? Is it very strong? What's the luster of yarn? All these things come together. So even if 2 pairs are 100% cotton, the quality, the durability, the feel, and the luster may be entirely different. If you've been following us at the Gentleman's Gazette, you know that we're big proponents of natural fibers. Why? Well, they've proven over time that they're really nice to wear. You don't have to worry about anything leaking into your body. And they just feel better. They breathe better. They're more comfortable at the end of the day. So our $70 LL Bean pair is made of 98% cotton and 2% spandex. There's not much more information about it, so we'd have to send it to a lab to actually do tests to see how many double rubs can it withstand before it breaks. Our $295 pair of corduroys is made out of 100% cotton that is rather heavy. It has a beautiful luster, and it has a double rub rating of 20,000, which is a really good rating even for upholstery fabric. So when you wear these pants, you know that you can wear them for years to come, which means it's automatically more green because you're not producing cotton over and over and over again and just throw it, but everything that's needed, all the chemicals in the finishing process are just used once, and you can wear those pants for a decade or longer. Personally, I haven't seen how the LL Bean fabric was woven, but the warp count per inch is going to be a lot lower than on the $295 Fort Belvedere pants. Why does it matter? A higher warp count is more costly in the weaving process, but it also yields a superior, more durable fabric. Now, when it comes to the overall weight, heavier doesn't always mean more expensive. However, if you have a high warp count fabric, then a heavier fabric is definitely going to be more expensive. Another thing that will be really different between the two pair of pants is the fabric nap. When it comes to corduroy pants, you have this nap that goes in two different distinctive directions. When you brush the corduroy down, you have this soft, shimmering, and mesmerizing surface. If you brush it up, even with your hand, you can already feel that you get a rougher, more textured surface. On cheaper corduroy pants, this nap will deteriorate much quicker over time. You will see there's areas where the material comes out and you see almost little holes in that nap. On the expensive pair of corduroys, it's going to stay like that for a much longer time. Also, when you get really cheap corduroy pants, sometimes what happens is that on the front side, the nap direction is top down, and on the back side, it's bottom up, meaning the pants just don't look right. On the LL Bean pair, they at least got the nap all in the right direction. But if you compare the LL Bean on the left to the Fort Belvedere on the right, you can see a clear difference with these pants just by hanging there all brand new. The LL Bean one looks fuzzier, looks more matte, and is just not nearly as lustrous as the Fort Belvedere one. Now, this becomes particularly obvious when there are wrinkles in the pants. And as you walk, there are going to be a lot of wrinkles. As you sit, just see how the wrinkle reacts to the light on the Fort Belvedere versus on the LL Bean. Now, typically, cheaper pants are also made in countries with a lower cost structure. So the LL Bean pants are made in China, probably from Chinese fabric. The Fort Belvedere pants are made in Western Europe, in Portugal, made of fabric that is made in Italy. Now, when it comes to corduroy fabric, the two big powerhouses are English corduroys and Italian corduroys. Typically, the difference between them is that the English ones are a bit stiffer, they're often a bit firmer, and the Italian ones are more fluid and smoother. Now, these Fort Belvedere trousers try to combine the best of both worlds. It is a heavier, denser fabric that is like an English corduroy with a finishing and a fluidity of more of an Italian corduroy. There's also a big difference on the weaving density and the weight of the fabric. Now, you can get quality corduroy fabrics that are lightweight and you can some that are heavyweight. So you can get the right kind of fabric for your purpose and climate. The pair of LL Bean pants in size 38 by 32 weighs 716 grams, which is about 25¼ ounces. The Fort Belvedere corduroys in a size 38 waist with an inseam of 31, so a little shorter, weighs in at 984 grams or 34.7 ounces. So that's a substantial difference in weight of over 30%. When it comes to fabric, they typically come in a weight measurement. That is typically the width of the fabric, which is about 150 centimeter, and then the length, which is a yard or 1 meter. For most corduroy pants, you need it between 1.5 and 1.7 meters of fabric. So if you multiply that and you add things like the buttons and the trimmings, you come to a certain weight. So over the last 2 years, I tested probably 20 different corduroy weights, starting at a low end at about 325 grams per running meter, all the way up to 825 grams per running meter. My favorite fabric weight was 705 grams for the meter because while it was still heavy and warm and comfortable, it wasn't as audible and the physical feedback was much less pronounced and it was much more pleasant to wear those. So the Fort Belvedere corduroys are made of this 705 gram weight. Of course, when you put in a pair of corduroys for the first time, the fabric will be somewhat different. But as you wash them, and I suggest you wash them inside out, you'll get a softer fabric over time that feels extremely comfortable. It's basically like a short break-in period for your trousers, but with the Fort Belvedere trousers, that is not the case. There's no real big break-in period. Also with the LL Bean one, there's not a big break-in period. It feels rather soft out of the box. When you have the pants on, you can clearly see the difference though. The drape of the LL Bean pants is much inferior to the Fort Belvedere pants. Also, the feel on the inside as well as the outside on the LL Bean pants is much inferior to the Fort Belvedere pants. It's stiffer, it's flimsier, it's just unexciting. Now, just out of curiosity, I weighed my Polo Ralph Lauren trousers that are the same size, same inseam, and they weigh 805 grams. That's about 28.5 ounces. It also has the same Wale, which means the same size of ridge as the Fort Belvedere one. And it's a little higher quality and feel than the LL Bean pair of pants. But it is a noticeably stiffer feel. It's not as luxurious, not as heavy as the Fort Belvedere one. So what about durability? I think the pants I had the longest are the Polo Ralph Lauren ones. They've definitely shown some wear, especially in the crotch area for me, because I have big thighs, but also in other areas of the pants. The LL Bean ones are relatively new, so I haven't seen them wear out at all yet, but I'm pretty certain they will wear out at a much earlier point in time. First of all, because it's a lighter weight fabric, and it's $70. You simply cannot make a fabric with a super high double rub count that is comfortable to wear in a pair of trousers. The Fort Belvedere ones I've worn for a year. I've washed them many, many times to see how they behave and perform, and I haven't seen any signs of aging yet. I can probably wear them for 10 years, maybe 12 years or 15 years, so I still have a lot of time ahead of me to test to see when they finally wear out. Something you typically also see in a fabric with a lower density of warp threads is that they will bunch out in areas and won't keep their shape as well as a higher end fabric will. Of course, that's all the theory, and we can only see how they truly hold up in years to come. Now, because manufacturers don't want to wait for 15 years and wear trousers until they understand how long a fabric will actually last, there is something called a double rub test. It's also known as the Weizenbeek abrasion test, and it's really popular in the upholstery industry. So if you have fabric that is 15,000 or above, it's considered a super heavy duty fabric that would use in high traffic areas, such as restaurants or maybe airports. That one were also suitable for, let's say, having kids and dogs and animals that are really hard on the fabric. Then there is medium duty, which is 9,000 to 50,000 double rubs. This would be good for, let's say, living room furniture. Then there is light duty, which is 3,000 to 9,000 double rubs, which is better for like occasional furniture. And then there is less than that, which is anything under 3,000 double rubs, which is typically in an inferior fabric. So everything above 15,000 double rubs is considered heavy duty. The 825 gram fabric that we tested had 40,000 double rubs, so it's extremely durable, and you could call them forever pants. The fabric at 705 grams, that's used for the Fort Belvedere pants, still has a rating of 20,000 double rubs, which is above the heavy-duty categorization. So this is also a pair of pants that will last you a very, very long time. It won't be as long as the 825 gram pants, but it's a lot more comfortable to wear. Sadly, the LL Bean pants don't mention anything about the double rub rating, but I would guess it's more in the 3,000 to 5,000 range. Could be less. I don't know. I haven't tested it. If you look at the LL Bean cords and the Fort Belvedere cords, you can see there's a difference in the size of the cord, which is called Wale. So the ridges or cords are the wales. And so a 4-wale cord means there are 4 cords or ridges per inch or 2.54 centimeters. Typically for menswear pants, you will find anything from an 8-wale cord to maybe like a 12-wale cord, or sometimes 14, 16 or more. Once you go to a 4-wale cord, you get a look that is more resembling a grandma's sofa. I would say the most popular Wale size for classic menswear is the 8-wale cord. If you look, the Polo Ralph Lauren corduroys are an 8-wale cord, the Fort Belvedere pants are an 8-wale cord, and only the LL Bean ones are a little slimmer. The LL Bean pants are an 11-wale cord. Now, one big difference between the cheaper corduroys and the more expensive corduroys is the color options that you get. On the LL Bean website, they have 4 colors, one being asphalt, which is a gray, then a dark charcoal, which looks almost black, a khaki color, and a sepia color, which is kind of a mid-brown. Fort Belvedere, on the other hand, comes in 14 different colors. So no matter if you want something classic in the brown family, something more in the blue family, or unusual things like yellow, red, green, blue, you got it. Now, when it comes to coloring garments, there are different ways to get there. First of all, you could dye the fiber. This is typically done if you want a mottled color effect. Then you could dye the yarn. Then you can dye the fabric, and then you can dye the entire garment. Typically, a garment that is fiber dyed, you do that because you have multiple different colors in the fiber, and then you twist the yarn, you get this nice melange effect. That is typically the most expensive. However, if you want consistency in a solid color, it is often yarn dyed or fabric dyed. Of course, from a production point of view, just having one yarn color and making the same stuff and then coloring it in different colors is much more cost efficient. Fortunately, the dyeing chemicals and technology is so advanced these days that you probably don't have to worry about the color rubbing off or being inconsistent over time. Now, if you look at the LL Bean pair and the Fort Belvedere pair side by side, and you could even throw the Polo pair, you can definitely see that the Fort Belvedere colors are the most vivid and rich. Now, another big difference between a more expensive pair of corduroys and cheaper corduroys are typically the fit and the features. These days, most pants come in a medium to low rise, and they're based on standard patterns. When you go with more expensive brands, you typically get more thought-through patterns with more special features and a fit that is probably different. Over the years, I've tested many corduroys, and my big challenge was always that my thighs were often too big for the pants, therefore making them not really comfortable. If I found something that was big enough in the thigh, it was too wide in the hem, and overall the proportions were off. The LL Bean pants have what I would call a mid-rise, higher than what you would get from a fashion brand like H&M, but the cut is somewhat unflattering. It's a straight leg. It does fit me off the rack, which is nice, but the hem, it's all a bit uninspiring. It's advertised as stretch country corduroy, and because of that, it has like an elastic waistband, which reminds me more of grandpa clothes. Also, I can tell that there's definitely some vanity sizing going on because this feels quite roomy. I'd say I can take them in at least by 1.5 inches. My Polo Ralph Lauren pants have a pleated front because that was the only way for me to actually fit into them. Their flat front options just never fit me, so I had to go with that option. Generally though, I think corduroy, because of the vertical ridges, works better with a flat front. The rise is a little lower than the LL Bean pants, and it's a little tighter in the thigh. I had them hemmed with turn-ups or cuffs because it adds a bit more weight, and I think it works well with corduroy fabrics. If you wanted cuffs, you can just get the LL Bean ones in a longer size, and you can still have the cuffs made at your alterations tailor. I also tried many other brands, such as Cordings, which come in a nice color variety, and they have a decent fabric, but their cut just never worked for me. I mean, if I wear these pants, I look like a pressed sausage. Also felt the hem was too wide, and by default they came with a button fly. You could upgrade to a zip fly for an additional upcharge, but overall those pants just never worked for me and were not even remotely to being flattering. So the Fort Belvedere corduroys are different in a number of ways. First of all, there are the highest rise of all of them that I've ever tried. Why? Well, during the golden era of menswear in the 1930s, men always wore high-waisted pants. They were more comfortable, they sit on your natural waist, and they elongate your leg line, and they allow for a nicer drape of the fabric. Because it sits on the waist, you also don't have to deal with your pants sliding down all day. The Fort Belvedere ones, they feel roomy in the thigh, they're very comfortable, but they don't look baggy. That's because they're tapered down towards the hem in a very elegant way. Basically, most brands, they start with a base size, and from there, they scale up and they scale down. Meaning, as your waist gets a little bigger, your hem gets a little bigger, your knee, your thigh, and so forth. However, that's not what's necessarily most flattering for people. If you look at the Fort Belvedere size chart, you will see, for example, that at the lower end, the hem size doesn't get smaller, because if you do that and you wear the pants at a size 28 or at a size 30, actually your socks will stick to your legs and you will constantly find yourself having to pull your pants down. That's not just annoying, but also looks bad. Also for Belvedere, you can see that the leg opening at size 36 is the same as size 38, 40 or 42, because at some point in time, it doesn't make sense to make the leg opening wider. The same is true for the rise. There is a point where the rise simply gets too high and it kind of overlaps your rib cage, which is not what you want. If you want a lower rise trousers, I think Polo, Ralph Lauren and Cordings is what you want. If you want a slightly higher rise trouser, LL Bean is better. If you want a true high rise trousers, Fort Belvedere is definitely the pair of corduroys to get. Also, if you have bigger thighs or if you've had issues with fitting in your pants, the Fort Belvedere sizes are designed to be full in their cut. However, of course, if you're a size 28 or 30 waist, you will not have really big thighs. So the pattern was scaled down more, so even people with a kind of slimmer leg can still wear Fort Belvedere corduroys. At different price ranges, you typically also find different backings. That means, what's the inside of the corduroy trouser like? That's important because the corduroy fabric is directly in touch with your skin and you want it to be comfortable. All the trousers here, LL Bean, Cordings, Fort Belvedere, and Polo have the more elevated backing with the ridges and the twill weave. In terms of softness, I personally prefer a really soft feel. I would rank them as the Polo is the stiffest, followed by the LL Bean, and then Cordings and Fort Belvedere are at similar levels and are the softest. When it comes to details, there's typically a clear difference between cheaper trousers and more high-end trousers. On a cheaper end, you get very standard features. The belt loops are more of an afterthought. There's just a simple button in the front, it's very functional, there's a zip fly, but there's no attention to detail or anything that says this is a special pair of pants, because it isn't. So if you look at the LL Bean pants, there's a simple button, there's no double button, no French bearer, there's nothing that covers anything up. The belt loops are not anything special. They have this weird grandpa style elastic waistband, which is not something I like, but it's typical for this price range. The Polo pants are a slight upgrade. They have a French bearer. They have pleats in the front to get that extra room that I needed, but otherwise they're also not very exciting or special. The Cordings have an elastic waistband with buttons, which again, I'm not a super fan of. By default, they have the button fly. You can also upgrade to the zip fly. If you do that, that adds $29 to the cost, and once you do it, you can't return them anymore. The Fort Belvedere pants have jetted pockets that are set at a very different angle than the LL Bean ones. It also has a nice little ticket pocket with a flap that is buttoned. The waistband is a little larger and features two closing buttons. Also, there's an overlap. It's more inspired by classic dress trousers. The idea was that you could wear a classic dress belt, but also a more rugged casual belt that was a little bigger and it would fit with the belt loops. The loops themselves are also a little finer than what you, for example, see on LL Bean. It's more evocative of higher quality trousers that you would get from a tailor. If you also look on the inside, you see a lot of differences in the details. The LL Bean one, for example, has no room to expand the pants. You can just make them smaller, not bigger. There's no information on the composition of the interior waistband and pocket lining. On a Polo Ralph Lauren pants, there is some fabric reserves. The edges of the fabric are nicely taped, but there's also no information on the material of the inside of the waistband or the pocket lining. On the Fort Belvedere pants, you can see that they clearly labeled that even all lining materials are made of 100% cotton. They also have a specific crotch lining, which is made in acetate, that helps to prevent any chafing or wearing out of the fabric in the thigh area, where it's usually a high rub area. Fort Belvedere also has by far the largest fabric reserve, so you can really alter these pants to your heart's content. Moreover, there's a little loop in the Fort Belvedere pants, so it allows you to hang them, for example, if you're at the gym or somewhere, so you don't have to fold and crease the pants, but it can hang nicely, and you have a better looking pants when you leave again. Also, if you look at the buttons at the LL Bean price level, you get a cheaper, more plastic horn imitation button. Polo Ralph Lauren has their own branded buttons. Cordings has plastic buttons in the color of the fabric, and Fort Belvedere has higher quality Corduroy or horn buttons. Most of the time they're in matching colors, but sometimes, like on the red pants, they're in contrasting colors. As you can see in their descriptions, Fort Belvedere provides a lot more information about the pants, the details, and why it was designed that way than other retailers do. So at the end of the day, there's a clear difference between cheaper pants and more expensive pants. To me personally, the biggest reason to go with a Fort Belvedere pant is because of the size. Now, I'm biased, of course, because I designed those pants and I wanted something that was different and was out there on the market. I've always enjoyed wearing high-rise trousers with a full cut, but I didn't want a pair of pants that looked like an original 1930s pair of pants that a reenactor would wear. This is a pair of pants that modern men can wear in this day and age. They can feel comfortable. They don't have to worry that the pants will wear out. There are thoughtful details in there that look cool, like the little ticket pocket with the flap, but also things like a little loop or an extra fabric reserve, so if you gain a few pounds, you can still wear these pants. Paying more provides you with a bit of fabric, with a more well-designed pattern. It took us about 2 years to design these corduroys, but I firmly believe that we've created a really great pair of pants that will stand the test of time. So in today's video, I was wearing a very casual combination consisting of a long sleeve polo shirt by Spear & Mackay in kind of like a petrol blue. I'm wearing a pair of corduroys from Fort Belvedere. It's the model Stancliffe. I'm combining them with a pair of brown and bright blue pair of socks, also from Fort Belvedere, to pick up the color of the cognac pants and the polo shirt. And on my feet, I have a pair of Trickers triple sole boots that are full broked and a traditional British country boot. I'm combining it with a leather belt in kind of a tan color by Fort Belvedere, which is part of the system, so you can exchange the buckles. I'm wearing a lapis lazuli pinky ring with some diamonds in yellow gold that matches the yellow gold buckle of my belt.